For anyone who's not familiar with what it's like to be a ski racer, talk about what it's like standing at the top of the hill, towing the line, and knowing that like it's you versus the course, but you're also competing against other people. I'm curious, what's the mindset going into a race like that?
Yeah, so first, it doesn't just happen every 4 years at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Most people are committing their whole lives training for it, trying to get to that next level. But it's unlike any other feeling I've actually ever felt before, other than probably public speaking in front of a lot of people. It's like a similar pit in your stomach, but you're standing up there looking out at the mountains, and you're right, it's you versus the course. You kind of go down and inspect it, but then you have to kind of trick yourself into being able to push the line and take risk in order to go as fast as you possibly can down a sheet of ice. Because in a perfect world, we're not skiing on snow. They'll go down with water, inject it every 6 inches all the way down. So picture just a hockey rink of perfect ice is ideally what we're competing on. And then they're going 40, 50 miles an hour, depending on the discipline, up to 70, 80 if it's a speed event. And you're trying to calm your mind, but be ready to move as fast as you possibly can and react to everything. And it's the hardest challenge that I've ever had mentally, is to allow yourself to consistently perform at that high level and let yourself free fall down the hill.
Yeah, it's interesting, that feeling that you were describing, how the only feeling that you've ever had similar to competitive skiing is when you public speak in front of a lot of people. And I think that's something that ex-athletes really struggle with, especially when they're done, when you've basically committed your life for 15 plus years to something, and then you graduate and you're like, all right, that's it. I'm not doing this professionally. Now I have to figure out what else I want to do. And it's really hard for people to get that same experience in the corporate world. I think a lot of athletes mistakenly try and get it, and I'm sure some can get that feeling, which is great. But I think that's something that Harry and I both felt at our jobs when we were living in the Northeast. It was very difficult to replicate the purity of that feeling. And I think we're getting that now, but it took some years to get there too. And it sounds like you're maybe getting that feeling earlier than we did with all the cool stuff you're doing now, or at least the endurance races.
Yeah, the endurance races, I miss training for something, but there's definitely still things you struggle with when you've done something every day for 15 years of your life, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, move on. There's definitely times when you still think about it, or you still have that childhood dream of like, oh, what would it be like to go to the Olympics? And last year it was December 22nd. And I was racing and tweaked my back. And then 24 hours later, I was lying in my bed. I woke up, tears running down my face, and my entire body was having a Charlie horse happen. And I laid on the floor. I couldn't sleep in my bed. It was too soft. And then I woke up the next day and my range of motion was about 2 inches. So I thought I was going to have the senior season to get to compete one more year, try and be on the national championship team, win a championship with CU. And like that, it went away. And if you've been hurt before, you know what it's like to be injured. If anyone who's had an injury, if like, oh, I can play through this pain or my season's over. And I knew it was going to be over. I ended up bulging a disc, cracking my disc wall, pinching my spinal column. I got MRIs up at the Stedman Clinic, and we were talking about disectomies and back surgeries.
Dang.
So overnight, the end of the season, my last college season went away, and likely in the same time I'm processing that's likely the end of my career. So walking away from that was definitely a void, but filling it with training for something has been huge for me, just an outfit.
Was that injury, was that from a crash, or was it just kind of wear and tear?
It was more just like overuse. Skiers have notoriously bad backs. We'll push 3 or 4 Gs in a turn. I probably know 7, 8, 9 kids who've had back surgeries, spinal fusions before 25. I broke my back when I was 17. So I knew kind of what I was getting myself into. I decided to do more of a non-traditional rehab process through yoga, stretching, core, mobility, and was able to get back to like 99% by 10 months without having to get surgery. But it was a long road to get there.
Did you feel like you entered a mourning period at all when you realized that the season was over?
In the short term, on the micro, definitely. Like there's so many thoughts running through your head. So I basically finished all my credits by that point. So I was doing a 5th year to basically compete one more season at school. I had a 1-credit grammar class and maybe a marketing capstone, but essentially I didn't even have school. All my friends had graduated. I was 3 or 4 years older than everyone else in school, and the one thing I was supposed to be doing was gone. I couldn't walk, so I was just lying on the floor in my room thinking, what the hell am I doing with my life? And that's when, kind of through that rehab process, is when I started spending a bit more time with Eric, because I had free time on my hands. I could drive down to the gym in Denver and work out, and that's when I started meeting other people in the health and wellness space or the entrepreneurship space, because I was excited about some of these other opportunities that I hadn't been able to say yes to for a long time.
Is there a race that stands out to you as one where you're like very dialed in and just had the performance of your life?
Yeah, it's funny. So I actually transferred to CU. I went to Boston College for one semester and then took a semester off, transferred, luckily got a spot on CU. There were 3 kids that were supposed to be on the team in the spot that I ended up getting. One of them went to a national team. One of them ended up not being NCAA eligible because of credits in high school. And the third one had some issue where it just didn't work out. So I got a call December 17th that I had a spot on the team to start January 1st. And the coach calls me and goes, "Gosh, Keto, when are you coming to school?" In his Czech accent. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go back to college, if I was going to be done skiing. 2 weeks later, I'm driving out to Colorado with my dad. 2 days after that, I have the best race of my college life. And it was no pressure. I had no idea of how I was supposed to do. And I moved from the back into 6th position with a massive mistake. And then I spent the next 4 years chasing that result again.
It's like a blessing and a curse, because the blessing is the performance itself, what you learn from that, right? It's like this weird paradox of, okay, the less pressure that I put on myself, the better that I do. But then at the same time, it's like you have this incredible race, and then you're just continuing to chase this performance. And some people like peak early and they never hit it, but there's always positive. I'm sure looking back, like,
Well, I became a better skier
Yeah.
throughout the next 4 years, and I got technically better, but I always struggled with races and competitions.
yeah,
With a certain aspect, the mental aspect of it is huge in skiing.
Yeah, can you talk about the mental aspect? Because when you first brought up the ski racing, I just am thinking about going down one of these Vermont mountains that I used to ski and how icy it was, and just picking up speed and going basically as fast as I could down a sheet of ice, and how nerve-wracking it is knowing, like, being a confident skier and knowing that, like, I'm in control, but, like, there's a certain element of serious risk on the injury side of things, but you're in competition. So you have to be able to push that out of your mind so you can do what you're designed to do. So
Yeah, it helps that you've been training for it your whole life for a certain point, so it feels so instinctive for the most part. But the difference from like competition and racing is the higher you get up in any sport, it just becomes more and more mental. And typically the best racers also push limits in everything else, whether it's partying or driving too fast or doing these other things. And like me specifically, I always trained faster than I raced. I had a hard time allowing myself to perform the way that I knew how to do on race days because of the competition of it. And I always think there's a difference between mental strength and mental toughness. Mental strength, to me, is like being able to perform at a high level consistently at the snap of the fingers, versus mental toughness is something where you have a bad day and you're able to pull yourself up and continue to sustain effort towards something for that period of time with blind faith. And I've always been mentally tougher than I am mentally strong.
I like that delineation between those two terms. I've never heard that before. Did you find, is that common in skiing, where you'll have certain teammates or competitors that are amazing in practice, but mentally they just can't put it together in competition?
To a certain point, yeah, and then there's some who are just lights out better than others, and typically they're the ones that are partying the hardest. Like there's definitely, like, they'll chase limits in everything that they do. And I do it to a certain extent. Like the sports I do, I downhill mountain bike, I chase extremes, but not in the same way in some other outlets.